Throughout history, there were many different execution methods carried out to bring the death of a criminal or a condemned individual. Some of the most brutal include hanging, drawing and quartering, in which a person was dragged through a town before they were hanged until almost dead, and then quartered and cut into 4 different pieces after they were beheaded. It was a terrifying ordeal, but the crowds would still flock to witness the killings, and thousands would watch the proceedings. There were many places across England, such as a Tyburn Tree and Tower Hill, where executions took place, but there was one very rare form of execution which was used during the reign of Elizabeth I in England. One of the strangest execution methods was crushing, and in history there are many other forms of crushing to death, and some even used an elephant to do this. Join us today as we look at this execution method, and remember as always to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Crushing has been used as an execution method for thousands of years, and one particular method of execution used throughout South and Southeast Asia for around 4,000 years was by using an elephant as the executioner. These animals were very well trained and were able to kill victims immediately, or by torturing them slowly, and they were used as a sign of the royalty's power over the people and also over nature and wild animals. Many people were shocked when they saw captives being executed by elephants, and it was known for being in particular very brutal. One onlooker who witnessed an execution in Siam using elephant crushing wrote, "For treason and murder the elephant is the executioner. The condemned person is made fast to a stake driven into the ground for the purpose, and the elephant is brought to view him, and goes twice or thrice round him, and when the elephant's keeper speaks to the monstrous executioner, he twines his trunk round the person and stake, and pulling the stake from the ground with great violence, tosses the man and the stake into the air, and in coming down receives him on the teeth, and making him off again, puts one of his forefeet on the carcass and squeezes it flat." Another writer wrote how the criminal is tied to a stake, and the elephant runs down upon him and crushes him to death. Another account of execution by elephant wrote how they could do more than simply crush, as it was said, "Upon a certain day when I myself was present, some men were brought out who had been accused of having attempted the life of the vizier. They were ordered accordingly to be thrown to the elephants, which had been taught to cut their victims to pieces. Their hooves were cased with sharp iron instruments, and the extremities of these were like knives. On such occasions the elephant driver rode upon them, and when a man was thrown to them, they would wrap the trunk around him and toss him up, then take him with the teeth and throw him between their 4 feet upon the breast, and do this just as a driver should bid them, and according to the orders of the emperor. If the order was to cut him to pieces, the elephant would do so with the irons, and then throw the pieces amongst the assembled multitude, but if the order was to leave him, then he would be left dying before the emperor, until his skin should be taken off and stuffed with hay, and the flesh given to the dogs." Elephants were still being used in the 1800s to take the lives using crushing. As one account stated, the man was a slave, and 2 days before had murdered his master, brother to a native chieftain, called Amir Sahib. About 11 o'clock the elephant was brought out, with only the driver on his back, surrounded by natives with bamboo in their hands. The criminal was placed 3 yards behind on the ground, his legs tied by 3 ropes, which were fastened to a ring on the right hind leg of the animal. At every step the elephant took, it jerked him forward, and every 8 or 10 steps must have dislocated another limb, for they were loose and broken when the elephant had proceeded 500 yards. The man, though covered in mud, showed every sign of life, and seemed to be in the most excruciating torment. After having been tortured in this manner for about an hour, he was taken outside of the town, when the elephant, which was instructed for such purposes, was backed and puts his foot on the head of the criminal. But crushing was not just used with elephants, it was also used in ancient Rome. One woman named Tarpeia was crushed to death after she betrayed the city of Rome in exchange for a reward of jewellery, and for this she was crushed to death and her body was cast from the Tarpeian rock, which was named after her. It was noted as a method of execution in the Aztec Empire, but was also used as a method of torture throughout the years. It was planned to use crushing as a slow method to extract information from an individual, and slowly weight would be placed on an individual's chest, and with this, as heavier weight was added, the individual would struggle to breathe and eventually give in. But some would even suffocate to death, as they refused to give over information. The problem with this was it was hard to write this method of torture and execution into law, and in Britain the use of the practice was abolished in 1772, and it was last used there in 1741. The practice was recorded in the 15th century as, "The defendant will lie upon his back, with his head covered, and his feet and one arm will be drawn to one quarter of the house with a cord, and the other arm to another quarter, and in the same manner it will be done with his legs, and let there be laid upon his body iron and stone, as much as he can bear and more. It was said that pressing to death would take a number of days, and death wasn't even linked to the amount of weight added. One record of pressing to death was written, and it said, "For such as stand mute at their trial, and refuse to answer guilty or not guilty, pressing to death is the proper punishment." In such a case the prisoner is laid in a low dark room in the prison, all naked but his privy members, his back upon the bare ground, his arms and legs stretched with cords, and fastened to the several quarters of the room. This done, he has great weight of iron and stone laid upon him. His diet till he dies is of 3 morsels of barley bread, without drink the next day, and if he lives beyond it, he has nothing daily, but as much as foul water as he can drink free several time, and that without any bread, which grievous death some resolute offenders have chosen, to save their estates to their children. But in case of high treason the criminal's estate is forfeited to the sovereign, as in all capital crimes, notwithstanding his being pressed to death. The most famous case of crushing to death or pressing in England was of St. Margaret Clitherow. She was a Catholic who, during the reign of Elizabeth I, was hiding priests, which was a capital offence which could result in execution. These priests had conducted underground worship, but eventually she was arrested for harbouring them. She refused to give in a plea, and because of this she was subject to torture, and was then sentenced to death. Clitherow was worried that her statements would implicate others and lead to the deaths of others, but because of this, to extract a confession, the authorities took her to the toll booth on the Usa Bridge, and she was then crushed to death by her own door. Her door was brought, and the alleged pregnant Margaret Clitherow was forced to lie down with a handkerchief tied across her face, whilst a sharp rock was placed under her back. The door from her house was put on top, and then large amounts of weight was placed on her, and she broke her back. Her death took around 15 minutes, but her body was left out for 6 hours after. It's alleged that when Elizabeth I found out about this, she was disgusted. It's believed that £700 of weight was added which killed her, and a number of criminals were executed in the same manner. 2 men in the 1700s lasted half an hour under £400 of weight before pleading guilty, and 2 others later refused to plead even under £400 of weight, and were then killed when witnesses sat on them to put them out of their misery. It was even used in America, as Giles Corey was pressed to death during his Salem witch trials when he refused to enter a plea. It's alleged that his last words were, "more weight," but it's believed he was already dead when the weight was being put on. But pressing and crushing to death was a diverse but brutal method of execution that was used throughout the centuries in a variety of different ways. It was a terrifying way to be killed, and witnesses would be haunted by the screams of the condemned. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.